Rockstars, welcome to Epiphanish, a podcast that will change how you perceive everything. Maybe. And for you to recognize where you have choice and options in your own life. I'm your host and guide, Lisa Westgate, an award-winning mental health advocate, best-selling author, rockstar, life and business strategist of almost a decade, and mum of three. Remember to share this episode and your Epiphanish moment on socials, and please like, follow, share and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms. Hey Rockstars, welcome to this episode of Epiphanish. I am beyond excited and honoured to share our guest today. I'm going to read you all of the bio he sent me. One, because he sent me one, and two, because there's really no part of it that I could edit out. So I'm going to tell you all about this amazing person. His name is Derrick McManus. I think we've known each other maybe 5 years or so, maybe a bit longer. And he's pretty incredible. Don't just take my word for it. Here's some bits and pieces about Derrick, and you're going to get to know him over the next little bit. Derrick McManus, this guy right here, cheated death. This is not just marketing hype. Derrick was a sniper and counter-terrorism operative with the South Australian Police Special Operations Section Star Force, which is, I guess, similar to the tactical unit here, which is the SOG, the Special Operations Group.
Right.
Derrick was shot 14 times and lying on the ground with multiple massive life-threatening injuries, including 2 severed arteries. He lay there for 3, count them, hours before he could be rescued. Spoiler alert, he's here, so he did survive. Sorry if you were waiting to find out what happened. Apparently, the first doctor thought he was already dead, and later in a news interview said, all the textbooks say Derrick should be dead. I think the only reason he's alive is that he hadn't read the textbooks. Derrick is now an inspirational human being who's also a speaker, who travels the world. He's had a 4,000 person audience in Singapore, and one company, tough, forced him to go to a 6-star resort in Fiji for a week. That must have been really difficult, Derrick. Derrick does keynotes at conferences worldwide and runs training workshops and series of workshops on human durability, which is something we're going to have a bit of a chat about, which is the ability to go beyond resilience to sustained optimal performance. If you want your people to perform better with less stress and create a psychologically safe work environment, Derrick is the person to call. Welcome and thank you for being here, Derrick McManus.
Thank you, Lisa. And I wrote that introduction just for you because we know each other so well. I haven't used that anywhere else, but I've gone, this is personality. She'll love this.
I do. I thought it was your standard bio. You should just now use that.
Okay, I'll take that advice. But yeah. No, written that specifically for you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thank you for that. So yeah, like I said, I think we've sort of been in each other's space for a good few years.
Yeah.
And we had the opportunity to meet in Ballarat, of all places.
All places, yeah.
All places.
And I thank you for driving up from Melbourne for that one little event. It was quite normal. Thank you.
You're South Australia based, so if anyone's doing a schlep, I think that was you. But yeah, it was great, and I think it was pre-COVID, so everyone is more familiar now. I think that real human connection in the room is so valuable, right? You can't cheat that. There's no shortcuts.
No. I mean, this virtual stuff is good. You can make connection, but being in the room together, there's just an energy.
Yeah.
For energy that comes with
100%.
it. Absolutely.
Which is why we love training and speaking and running workshops, right? Because that's the happy place. Is you get immediate feedback. You can feel the room. It's just such a real experience. That we're obviously both privileged to be able to play in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of, privileged to be here. Lately, it's been brought to my attention that that life is just such a gift. Life itself, being here, being like I've become really present, um, doing really little things, making a coffee, having a shower, just the I don't know, I kind of don't want to say privilege, but really the simple joys of life and the gratitude that comes with that. And obviously, someone that has had your experience, we heard a little bit about it in the bio. Um, I guess when you've had an experience like that or similar, your appreciation for simple, existence, it really brings things sharply into focus, I imagine.
I'm actually a very fortunate person in that post the shooting and the shooting I got and a very quick overview. I got within 30 seconds of death. The first doctor thought I was already dead. I then did 2.5 years of rehabilitation, highs, lows, tears, doubts, and we'll explore that. Um, but I've spoken to psychologists that spoke to me beforehand, and I've spoken to many of my friends. My personality hasn't changed between before the shooting and afterwards. And I'm very fortunate in that family has always been the number one priority to me. I'm absolutely passionate about my job, love my job. And you can't be in a job like this unless you're absolutely driven. Family becomes number one, though, always number one. But everything has a hierarchy of needs when we need to focus on it. But I've always appreciated nature and smelling the roses and appreciating seeing that kangaroo. I've seen hundreds and thousands of them, but each time I see another kangaroo, it's just, wow, that's special. So I've always been able to appreciate those little things as
Mm,
well as loving to drive my Audi and all the rest of it. I love my toys.
mm.
I love the basics too. Absolutely love them.
Where do you have you got any idea of like where you credit, I guess, that inherent presence or gratitude kind of mindset outlook? Was that something that was instilled in you as a kid, or was it something you think you developed, or was it modeled for you from it by
I credit my parents with an awful lot of my personality, my success, my attitudes, my approach. My one of my father's favorite sayings was when we were going through a hard time, was "Where's the silver lining?" Look
Mm,
for the silver lining. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. And the other saying that resonates with me so often is that when we talk about, "My gosh, that was lucky," or "that was
mm.
bad luck," one of his favorite sayings was, "Derrick, isn't it amazing? The harder you try, the more you practice, the luckier you get." We create our own luck in life. Uh,
Yeah.
so I've gone away from saying I'm a lucky person to saying I'm a fortunate person,
Mm.
because we create fortune. There's no two ways about it. Some stuff is still just pure luck. There's
Sure.
luck there, and some of it's bad luck, but that's minor by comparison to the amount of good fortune that we can create by the choices we make and the actions we take. And it really is about choices and actions.
Yeah, it's a very empowering position and point of view, isn't it? Like it's at the end of the day, the buck stops with me kind of mentality that, if you're the one that is the source of good luck and fortune and good happenings, um, it's for me, like I guess like empowering people and self-empowerment and getting people to understand that they have the greatest level of influence over their own life comes from them, right? Like people, we've got social media and we've got like everyone has opinions, right? They're like, what they're like. So, sure, there's all of that, but ultimately, who has the most influence over one's life is the individual themselves.
Absolutely. And we need to put that in context, because there's no doubt about it. My choices, my actions are the biggest influence on me, but that doesn't mean they're the only influence. I've had
100%.
things in my job that have gone wrong, and it's because somebody else has made a decision to change the environment that I'm in or the opportunity that's put in front of me. But the thing that we can always control is how we react to that and how we let it affect our future. And again, there's no two ways about it. I've been upset. I've had tears. I've been emotional about things that other people are doing. Um, but then there's that realization there's nothing I can do to change what they're doing. So I've got to change my response to it to
Yeah.
get the best outcome I can. It's maybe not going to be perfect, but it's the best outcome I can in the circumstances that I find myself.
Yeah, and there's so much, I love that. There's so much power in that awareness of where that boundary is. Like, this stuff is what I'm responsible for, and I can control, and I can influence, and I have choice in. And that stuff is outside my bubble, and I just have to, work with it as best as I can, like you said. I think just, uh, I was speaking to a client the other day who, feels overburdened because they're not clear on where that edge is. And so they've taken on responsibility for, other people's feelings and other people's actions. And I have to make sure that they're feeling okay. And I'm like, whoa, we need to work out where your edges are. So that you can run that ship. And like I said to my client, I'm not. You may I know I've spoken about him before on the podcast, and I credit him with this tip or idea. James Greenshields was an ex-major in the army. I'm pretty sure he was a major. Don't hang me, James. But he was his men that he was in charge of got hit by an IED, roadside bomb, and he had to deal with all that. But one of the things that he speaks about is in that context, in that conversation, is three things you can control, and that's your words, your thoughts, and your actions. Um, and I think it's so important to be clear. Um, yes, it's thoughts, words, and actions, but it's yours, right? And you can't control those three things in other people. You can influence, and you can guide, and you can mentor, and you can have your say, and you can make suggestion, but ultimately you can't control anyone else in those aspects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a misconception that, when you get into this space of understanding yourself and being in control of your mind and you don't let other people affect you, that you're in this Zen space of ultimate peace. No, it's
No.
just that you can bring things back under control. As I say, sleepless nights, upset, tears, frustration, they are normal. And
Mm,
I allow myself to immerse myself in those feelings because they're natural. But once I've immersed myself in them, I say, this is not where I want to stay. So what do I do now? And for me, it's about sustaining optimal performance. If we try to sustain peak performance, we'll go into burnout,
I love
right?
that.
Peak performance is appropriate at times, but
Mm,
then we've got to work out with the challenges we're facing and the environment that we're in, what is the very best we can do in that environment? And I think that's where a little bit of Zen comes from. Okay, in this environment, I can't be the best I can be because there are so many challenges. So, what's the best I can be? Get along on that optimal performance until you can get to the point where you can start growing again. And and that's where a little bit of the Zen kind of comes from, because I wind myself back and go, okay, I can't be up there. Let me relax in the space I am. And it's not a cop out. I'm still pushing myself as hard as I can, but it's accepting that the performance level is dropped a little bit. And that's the most appropriate place to be.
I love that distinction between optimal performance and peak performance. I think that's really crucial distinction, and an acceptance that optimal performance varies, environment to environment, state of being to state of being, how much sleep you've had. So we at Epiphanish are big advocates of the 80-20 rule. Which basically, 80% of the time I'm I'm making good decisions. I'm making healthy food choices. I'm all over it. And 20% of the time I'm under the doona. I'm like, I can't do today, right? And so I
Yeah.
guess, we talk about similar things with different language, but ultimately it's about a level of self-acceptance and compassion and forgiveness that today this is optimal, right? And sometimes that means, well, I've done a load of laundry and I got the kids to school and I went back to bed. And sometimes that's optimal for that day. And sometimes, super productive and, got a heap of work done on the computer and focused. And so I love that it's in the, it's very human, um, as well as talking about, performance. And because I think people hear the word sometimes peak performance or optimal performance, and there's a real, striving and goal setting. And I love that you've got that built in flexibility
Yeah.
of acceptance of, what are the capacities, what are the contributing factors for this moment or this day or this role or.
And I really like that 80-20 rule too, because I am a reasonably healthy, reasonably fit person. Certainly when I was in Star Force, we're expected to be at peak levels of fitness the majority of the time. So I ate healthy and I stayed fit. But the 80-20 rule is so applicable now, because there are days when I'm out. I mean, I've ridden my push bike, my bicycle. This is back in 2009, so well after Star Group. I rode from Adelaide to Melbourne in 4 days, 200 kilometres a day, 4 days in a row. 2022, I rode my mountain bike over the top of the Himalayas,
I was
5,400.
gonna say, didn't you go to Everest or something? You
Yeah,
went
yeah,
before.
absolutely. Riding over the top of that at minus 15. So fitness and health is a big part of my life. But the 80-20 rule, there are days when I sit down with a bowl of ice cream in front of Netflix and just go, do you know, it's time to have some time out and enjoy myself. But it's 20% of the time. It's not something I indulge in all the time.
Yeah.
Something in the workshops that I run, I run two different models of resilience. One is functional resilience, that we need day to day, week to week, just to be able to get through all that drudgery. And the other one is aspirational resilience, the one and that's a resilience model that we need to push ourselves to be able to keep on going to find peak performance. And the durability comes from flicking between one and the other.
Mm.
But the reason I mention that right now is in that 80-20 rule, the functional resilience has a step in there, which is guilt-free indulgence. And guilt-free indulgence, I talk about, I have a very healthy attitude to food and exercise. But if I open a packet of Tim Tams, I generally stop at around about 2 packets.
They deliberately put 11 Tim Tams in a packet so that you can't equally share a packet of Tim Tams.
Correct. And
You just
that's
have
a
to have a
standard
packet
packet.
each, right?
Now, this shows you how much I know about Tim Tams. The standard packet has 11. The specialty packets that are the double choc,
Oh,
all the
yeah.
flavors, they only have 9 per packet. Absolutely. So you still can't share them equally. So you've got, anyway, but
That's tricky.
I
You.
know my Tim Tams. But
I
but
knew
it isn't
I
but
knew
it is
we
an
were
80
friends for
20.
a reason.
It is an 80-20 indulgence, though, and we've got to keep that in perspective. But it's got to be guilt-free indulgence,
That's
right? We can't do it and berate ourselves. Otherwise, we don't get the benefit of just relaxing with it. And we can't berate ourselves for the next 3 weeks. I know that eating 2 packets of Tim Tams is going to impact me riding the bike if I was to do it all the time. But a one-off every now and then doesn't affect me too much. And I'm back on that 80% health and fitness and back on track quite quickly. But it's got to be guilt-free. And that's another thing that people need to get their head around. There's guilt-free indulgence in your food, guilt-free indulgence in taking 10 minutes away from the family to just being able to relax, taking your 2 weeks holidays from work and not having to check the emails and all those sorts of things. Guilt-free.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You say guilt-free. I talk about like self-compassion in that process. We're talking about exactly the same things. Um,
Yeah.
I just uh obviously we ran through the bio pretty quickly, and you we sort of skated over the fact that you were in a life-threatening situation. Could you just briefly outline, I guess, what happened? And I just want to plug into a couple of key moments, I guess, over that period of time, and then also in that recovery journey, where I'm really curious about choices and decisions that I assume you must have made to still be here to talk with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about choices and decisions and uh, projecting forward as to what impact that might have on our life, but doing the projection forward before you actually make the final decision out of all those options we have. So I joined Star Group in 1989. So yes, I'm an old man. And at the time I joined Star Group, I knew that I was going into an environment which was high risk arrest, dealing with potentially violent people who are armed with firearms. We do hostage and siege situations. We deal with counterterrorism, and counterterrorism is an environment where people don't play games and they're not there for fun. They're dead set serious. Cliff rescue, mine rescue, high-rise rescues, helicopter operations. And when the Queen came to visit South Australia, we were the close quarter protection to the Queen. So it's an environment where I knew there was a good potential that I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. So when I joined Star Group, I actually had a conversation with my wife. And this is, I describe them as open, honest, confronting conversations about the reality of, I'm going into Star Group, I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. The conversation was about, if I die, what's your life going to look like? So it's not all about us. We've got to consider those other people impacted by our behaviours and our choices. We had that discussion, and happy to delve into where that went a little bit later. I joined Star Group. I knew what I was stepping into, so I had a conversation with myself. If I do get shot, how would I like to respond to it?
Hang
And
on,
this
so you had a
very
conversation with yourself, like right at the beginning of this role,
absolutely,
but you ran through the scenario in your mind of if this happens.
yep,
That's
absolutely.
fascinating. Yeah,
To
sorry
the
to interrupt. Go
No,
on.
no, no. I ran through it in my mind to the extent that my stepdaughter Rachel, as she was growing up, she's a very challenging person in the very nicest way, but she will, hit you with questions. She's now a CEO of a multinational company, and so she's, this quite confronting person. But she asked me on two occasions, Derrick, if you get shot, what are you going to do? And instantly, I was able to articulate exactly the steps that I was going to take, the different possibilities of, it may be a minor shooting and I may be able to respond this way, but if it's absolute catastrophe and chaos, I'll be able to respond this way. So I thought through it to that extent that I was able to discuss it. Then I went through the visualization, and this is absolute training of our own body in visualization. And when we visualize it properly, we can feel the emotions. Our body gets excited or overwhelmed by things that are happening, and we train ourselves to be able to manage it. So many models that I work with that I'd love to discuss with you in depth.
We
One
wanted
of the
to
things
come back for another round two.
one of the,
I think just a comment on visualization. I think it's what people may not know is that the part of your brain that doesn't actually know the difference between real and imagined, which is why you can have a dream that you wake up from and it feels like you've really gone through the experience. So this is why visualization is such like true visualization and embodied visualization is such a powerful tool for scenarios like you're sharing, Derrick. Also for things like goal setting and working out where you want to go in your life and what you want to achieve and things like that. Because there's that part of your brain that doesn't know whether you're kind of role playing it or you're really living it. It's a really powerful tool.
absolutely. And to stretch that just a little bit more, it's the same part of the brain that when you talk about your favorite food, you start to salivate.
Yes.
You talk about biting into a lemon and you really imagine biting into a lemon. you can get that shudder in your body because your body is responding to it in that way. So
Exactly.
absolutely invaluable. But where I was going with that, and now I'm getting myself back on track, and I love going on tangents.
Oh, sorry,
And
it's a neurodiverse platform, so we've
oh,
got
I love it. I do
attention.
love it, and then be able to come back on track. So to prepare ourselves
Mm.
for what we can realistically expect to encounter, and preparing myself for the shooting, I've never been shot before. But what I did was I looked back on the previous experiences in my life and said, what's similar? What sort of behaviors have I done in those previous challenging situations that I'd like to bring forward? And if I can, I'll use them in this situation. And where have I performed badly that I'd like to improve on it? So one of the things that I'd experienced previous in my life, and I'll make a long story short, my partner and I got involved with two people in a car. We were going to arrest them for drugs on the center console. As we were going through the arrest procedure, the male offender on the driver's side of the car has pulled a pistol out, pointed it at my partner's chest, and started pulling the trigger. The gun was broken.
Oh,
It
God.
actually had to have the hammer cocked before it could be fired. Offender didn't know that at the time, so this was good luck, right? This was luck.
Yeah.
The good fortune came in when my partner had the ability to quickly respond, grabbed the barrel of the gun, pushed it away from himself and down into the footwell, called on me. I jumped into the car, got the guy in a headlock, held onto his wrist. The guy has then been calling out to his girlfriend, cock the gun, cock the gun. She's clambered over the top of all this wrestling, and she has actually cocked the gun. And as she's cocked the gun, I just slid my thumb between the hammer and the gun to stop it being fired. Now,
Are you
when I thought,
sure you're not like The Rock or Jason Statham? This is like some Bruce Willis action. That's unbelievable.
it,
You're a
and
superhero, Derek, I reckon.
he, but it's not unbelievable because, and I talked to a lot of people about this. I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter as a result of my choices and my actions.
What incredible
Right?
foresight. Honestly, most people, I think, just sort of walk around stumbling day to day, and, tomorrow's problem is tomorrow Lisa's problem. Like it's, so the level of considered foresight, I think, is really noteworthy.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. Um, and I'm going to take that a step further, just as we're talking on it, because when I run the workshops and get people to be able to implement this for themselves, I've had many people say, well, I could never train to the level of Star Group because you guys just get trained to that level that, if I got shot, I'd never be able to handle it. But being shot is not a normal part of your life. I
Yeah,
made choices that put me into that circumstance.
yeah.
So what I do at the beginning of every workshop, okay, let's say 80%, 80-20 rule, 80% of the workshops that I run is that I get the whiteboard out and I say, I prepared myself for what I could realistically expect to encounter. Star Group, I was a sniper, I trained with the SAS in counterterrorism, the Queen, all those things. I could realistically expect I may be shot. What's reality for you? And I
Mm.
get people to list the adversities that they can realistically expect to encounter. And for everybody, it changes. And this goes to students in schools, this goes to fighter pilots, this goes to finance, this goes to hairdressers. Everybody gets to list it. And it's problems with clients, problems with staff, health and fitness, finance, aging parents, teenage children. It's all these challenges that you can realistically expect to encounter in your life. And then I say, once you encounter these challenges and changes, what are the emotions you might feel as a result of it? And we start going through fear, anxiety, overwhelm, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually somebody gets to the point of going, actually, some of these could be exciting. Some of them could be fun. And we start going positive.
Mm.
I start giving rewards for the positive responses because we always go negative first, but let's start reinforcing the positive and let's get excited about thinking about positives. So we go through the emotions you might feel, and then I say, what are the resources you have to manage those emotions when you hit those challenges? And what people articulate is exercise, friends, resources, alcohol is one of those things that we use to relax, chocolate. It's a real conversation. Meditation, pets, all these sorts of things. And what I get people to realize is that the resources they have to manage their emotions are the same as the resources I had to manage my emotions, which are exactly the same as theirs. It's just that the challenges are different. So what I'm talking about when I say I did this, I did that, is exactly what everybody should be doing when they manage their challenges.
Yeah, and it really makes
Right?
it transferable, right? Because it's not this your experience is obviously very niche and quite extreme, but what you're pulling it down and saying the fundamentals of this is actually very transferable and applicable.
Absolutely. This
Yeah,
is not an elitist skill. This is something that everybody should be able to do, no matter their age. And people put skills in place relative to their age, relative to their experience and their expertise. And it is very, very transferable. The comment I get most often is, wow, that's actually very practical. That's something that I can take back to the office and use on Monday morning. And that's the way I like to operate. It
yeah. I
just,
sense that you're quite a pragmatic person as it is, like how, really about the tangible.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So now going back to the story. So I prepared myself. I went into Star Group. I was operating in Star Group for about 5 years, and then this job came up. And we were asked to go and arrest a guy for 197 counts of fraud. Now, fraud isn't something you normally associate with violence, and I love that little giggle. But we knew this guy's history. He'd made threats, he'd intimidated people in the past, but he'd never done anything of violence. So civil liberties and legislation says that we have to approach a certain way. We have to allow him to make a mistake before we take action. So we went to the house. As we approached, he started shooting. It was a semi-automatic weapon, a Chinese military weapon, bullets fired with the Chinese military bullets. He fired 18 times and hit me 14 times.
And when you
And
say we, it was just you and your partner, right? There's just two of you rocking up to this guy's door, or
no, this was a Star Force operation, or Star Group operation, as they're now called. When
right?
I joined, it was Star Force. It's now called Star Group.
Star Force sounds way cooler, but anyway,
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of politics behind the name changes.
yeah.
I'm still attached to Star Force. I
So,
loved it. Um,
how many in a group in terms of like how many people had turned up to bring this guy in?
so on a team, we have about 11 people, but there's people on leave, people on transfer, and all those sorts of things. On this job, there were 5 people turned up, and one guy with a video camera.
Roger.
Uh, so there was a sniper out in the bush, and he was just keeping an eye on the house. The sniper's main role is not to take a target out. Sniper's main role is to make observations and report back to the boss, to let the boss be able to run the operation as smoothly and safely as possible. So we had a sniper in the bush watching the house, watching him. 4 of us approached the house, and we took the video guy with us. This is the first time in history that the South Australia Police had videoed an arrest. And that footage
Oh,
became
lucky.
absolutely crucial in court. It was very, very
Lucky.
lucky,
Lucky.
absolutely. Yep. And it was one of those lucky things. We didn't know this was going to happen. We took the video there for other purposes, but we were lucky it was there because of the outcome. So, it's, maybe it's the 80-20 rule as well. I don't know how much it plays.
Mm.
But anyway, he started shooting. He fired. He hit me twice in the stomach. I lost 45 centimeters of bowel. Once in the left forearm, severed the radial artery. Once in the right wrist, severed the ulnar artery in the right wrist. 2 bullets in the left thigh, missed the femoral artery by the width of a piece of paper. 3 times across the back of the left calf, through the right Achilles tendon. It took out 80% of the Achilles tendon for about an inch and a half. In behind the right knee, and the rest I say are just bits and pieces. Didn't actually hit the body, but they were absolutely massive solid hits. One of them hit a ceramic plate. It didn't penetrate, but the textbooks say that being hit in a ceramic plate is like being hit with a sledgehammer, and the bruising and the impact behind it is exactly the same. It saves your life, but it still causes pain. I didn't feel any pain from that ceramic plate because I was on some very good drugs when I was in hospital. There were a few other pains there as well, so this one was probably less prominent.
Yeah, in the ambulance we would talk about distracting injuries. So
Yes.
sometimes people, if they have multiple injuries and one is sort of prominent and painful and visible, they can often not even know that they have another significant injury because they have a distracting injury. So, the brain's capacity to kind of deal with all of it, so it filters and it prioritizes. So it makes perfect sense that there were lesser, in inverted commas, issues that kind of were, that's not important right now, brain. We're going to focus on this really bad one.
And I like that terminology, and I'll adopt that terminology if it's okay with you, the distracting injuries, because there were some major injuries. And I get people to reach down in the workshops and just touch their Achilles tendon when I talk about the Achilles tendon. It's a very tender area of the body,
It is.
but I had absolutely no idea there was an injury to the tendon. I
Yeah.
did not feel any pain in that area at all. And even the rest of my injuries, the 2 bullets in my stomach just felt like somebody punched me in the stomach. The 2 bullets in my left thigh felt like somebody giving me a dead leg on the basketball court, or wherever it might have been. So it wasn't as if it was an overwhelming pain, but there were other injuries that, in fact, my left forearm, broken radial radius in 2 places, severed radial artery. It did not hurt. I could look at it, I could see the bones sticking out, but there was no pain associated with it.
I had many
Um,
times in ambulance where we would go to like, quite physically traumatic injury. So like a, very broken leg, or something with bones
yep.
sticking through skin. And very typically, uh, people would not complain of pain until they looked at it.
Yes.
It's only when they eyeball it and the brain goes, that should hurt,
Yep.
that the pain kicks in. So, yeah, it's fascinating how the body and the brain manage physical injury. And it's, I guess that's why I was a paramedic for a decade, because I do find it fascinating the way that the body responds. We better keep going because I keep
So,
interrupting because you're so interesting, Derek.
well, and I love delving into it. You've got a lot of different questions than I've been asked previously, and I love delving into the different aspects and different way of interpreting the information that comes out. So the long story short, he shot me. I fired back. When I fired back, he stopped. I then rolled. He fired again, and I've called out to my mates, I'm hit. I'm hit. The video is actually available on my website or on YouTube if you punch in the right words. Obviously, Derrick McManus and shot 14 times. It worked well. Um, I then went around. I actually got to my feet. Despite the injuries I had, I got to my feet again and staggered around the corner. But I didn't stay on my feet for very long, and I fell to my knees. Then I fell to my hands and knees, and I crawled along on my hands and knees, and then collapsed to the ground, rolled onto my back. And that's where I stayed for about the next 3 hours. I knew there were 4 things that I needed to do, and this was done in the pre-planning. It's
Yeah.
not something you come up with in the midst of adversity. So the first one I knew I needed to do was control shock, not let shock take control of the body. And I won't go into the depth I normally explain it to. The second one was to control panic, not let panic take control of the situation. I then had to control my breathing, and I had to control my heart rate. Because if I could control panic, shock, my breathing, and heart rate, I would slow down my rate of bleeding, and I'd survive for a little while longer. I was lying there for 3 hours, monitoring my body closing down, monitoring the pools of blood getting bigger on the ground next to me. And I felt my legs closing down. My arms lost strength because the pistol that I was holding onto to protect myself fell out of my hand. It was
Mm.
too heavy for me to hold on to. And at 2 hours, I'm fully conscious throughout this period. So monitoring my body, monitoring where the offender is he coming to get me, and thinking through that process of how do I intimidate him to make him feel like he's still in danger and I'm not helpless. And at 2 hours 45, my blood supply got so low, even my vision closed down, and my vision went to this absolutely pristine white. Thoughts that ran through my mind is, this is what they talk about. The last bit of life is that absolute white light before it absolutely snaps. But that's when I started fighting my hardest, started moving my body the little bit that I could, started speaking out loud to myself and saying, Derrick, don't give up. Derrick, keep on fighting. Fortunate things, 2 rifle shots were fired from outside the house. I could still hear the offender inside. So when I heard these 2 rifle shots, absolute confirmation. My mates from Star Group were on their way to get me. Dump of adrenaline, dump of endorphins, vision snapped back up to perfect, but I was passing in and out of consciousness. Boys got to me within 15 minutes of those 2 rifle shots, and people say, how do you know it was 15 minutes? As a copper, I'm monitoring time. I had a watch on. I'm monitoring time when things are happening all the time. It's a copper thing to do. So the boys got me out to the doctor, Bill Griggs, and at that time he said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive. There was no movement, no sound, no breathing, and I didn't have any color in my skin because there wasn't enough blood to give it pigmentation and coloring. And he worked his magic. He stood in direct line of fire, bullets whizzing around his ears. So absolute amazing man, amazing nurses and ambos, and my Star Group mates who were standing around to support them as well. They got me to hospital, obviously, saved my life. And then it started the 2.5 years of physical rehabilitation. And it was highs, it was lows, it was doubts. It was doctors telling me I'll never be able to walk properly again. And unless I have this operation, I won't be able to do that. And all these experts telling me what I can do, what I can't do. But I, and very happy to give all the details. But whatever the doctor said, I basically defied the odds each time. I shouldn't have survived the shooting because of the injuries and the amount of blood I lost. In fact, the first doctor to get to me, and these are his words in a news interview, he said, all the textbooks say that Derrick shouldn't have survived. His heart should have stopped. The only reason he survived is he hasn't read the textbooks.
It's such
So
a great quote.
I've defied medical knowledge, essentially. I then defied expectations because I survived surgery. I was told I'll never be able to walk properly again because of the damage to the Achilles. I walked, I ran, I sprinted, I went back to football, soccer, basketball, just with 20% of an Achilles tendon, and went back to full duties in Star Group without any restrictions. And I've been back to high risk arrest, hostage siege. The next question that comes from people is, what about your psychology? What about the internal happenings in your brain? This happened 29 years ago. 29 years ago, real men, and I do the inverted commas, real men didn't get therapy. They didn't speak to psychologists because we were tougher than that. I was very fortunate, lucky. I threw my hand in there and said, get me a psych. I want to talk to a psych. This was about preparing myself again for what choices am I making? What circumstances have I found myself in? What's my realistic expectation of what I can see in the future? Same as the whiteboard for anybody else. I wanted to talk to the psych about what are the challenges I can expect? What are the changes I can expect? Who's dealt with it well? Who's dealt with it badly? If it happens to me, how can I handle it? And because my thinking was already this way, I had lots of things in place. He certainly gave me lots of good advice. I picked his brain. He picked my brain. 3 months after the shooting, our first interview, he cleared me psychologically to go back to work the next day. Never needed to come back again, never needed to have ongoing therapy after such massive trauma. And so this is where the model for human durability comes from. And it really is that confidence to believe that what we know, what we can do is greater than what other people may expect of us. But if we trust ourselves, we know what we can do. We may not know the complete end result, but we know what the next step is. For me, that step was to go and get advice, go and talk to some expert to find out what else can happen. In my rehabilitation, it was one step after another, moving my little finger to start off with, and then it became a hand, and then it became an arm, and just trusting ourselves. We've got to take advice and support from other people, but we've got to drive it. We've got to be that instigator of the action, and never lose that control as much as we take support from other people.
Yeah, amazing. There's so much in that. We could definitely talk for days. Um, one of the things that I've really that popped in my mind while you were speaking, and thank you so much for sharing. I heard a quote a few years ago. I'm pretty sure it was from Deepak Chopra, and he said, when you know whether you, whatever you think about him, but he talked about it. So he's a medical doctor, and then he's gone. You know, he's obviously a spiritual person,
Yep. Yep.
but he said you can uh, receive and accept a diagnosis, but you don't have to accept the prognosis.
I like it.
And that really, so for those that aren't in the medical space, or what the difference is there, basically a diagnosis is when someone tells you, usually a doctor, let's say, says, you know, this is the current state of play, this is where you are at now, whether it's, you know, a mental health condition, or you know, you have a diagnosis of an illness, or whatever it is. This is what all the evidence and the tests and everything, tick the boxes, whatever, this is what you have, or you know, whatever, right? So that's what a diagnosis is. A prognosis is a future prediction of how that is then going to play out, and what that's going to look like moving forward. Now that you have this, this is what you can expect. And I guess there's a purpose to it, because we want people to, you know, have some context for what they can expect from, you know, from that diagnosis. And I get that. But what I love about it is, okay, so they're experts in what they're experts in, but that, you know, you have 20% of your Achilles left. You know, you've got diminished capacity. You have to, you know, learn to, grip strength is going to have to come back. Like, all of that to me is the diagnosis part. Telling
Absolutely.
you you're never going to walk properly again, you're never going to be able to do this. That's the prognosis. And I love that your experience of it reflects that, as in, well, that bit's up for debate, you know. And in my experience of being diagnosed, PTSD, anxiety, depression, at 34, you're on a disability pension. This is your life now. And I accepted the diagnosis. Okay, this is where I am. But this idea that I had to spend the next 34 years sitting on the couch watching Netflix, being a shell of a human because I have a mental illness, that's the bit that I was like, I'm really keen on an option B. Like, is there an alternative? That doesn't sound great, you know? And so I challenged that prognosis. And I think, yeah, so that's one of the things that really dropped in as you were sharing, is that that pivot point of choice, in that, right?
And this is a subject we could do a whole podcast
Yeah.
on the phone, because I was told I'd never be able to walk properly again. I'd never go back to Star Group. I'd never go back to policing. My life was take a pension and sit on your bum, watch Netflix. Not that Netflix was around then, but
Well,
you
that's
know,
right. Yeah.
watch daytime TV.
Yeah.
Um, and we've got to set ourselves up with two different perspectives on this. I was not willing to accept that as the only outcome. I wanted plan B, I wanted plan C, plan D, plan E. What are my other options available to me? Because, as you say, doctors have expectations, and the expectations are based on averages. If
Yeah.
you are the sort of person that is not as driven as anybody else, you are going to get less than average. If you're a person who is driven more than anybody else, the potential for you to get better outcomes, and I would say potential very deliberately, the potential for you to get better outcomes is definitely there. And I was a driven person, and I wanted to push for the better outcomes. The second part of it is that I needed to make sure I didn't set myself up for failure of expecting that I would achieve them. I had to say, I want to push for it. The doctors are telling me this. I may get it, but I may only get what the doctors do. So if I don't achieve what I want, I'm not a failure. I haven't done anything wrong, but at least I've had a crack at it.
Yeah.
Right? And accept the fact that I want to try, but if I don't quite make it, people would call that a failure. I'm saying if I don't make it there, then I'm probably still going to be in a better position than if I'd just gone, I'm just going to sit on my backside and do nothing.
Well, at least then
Because
you know. At least then you know either way, right? If you
absolutely.
if you don't give it a shot, regardless of being super attached to a particular outcome, there's always that question. Like what? No, what if I had given it a shot? What could I have achieved? Right? And I think people like you and I are dissatisfied with that. Like, that's not an option to sit there and wonder what if. We've got to lean in and go, well, I'm just gonna give it a shot and we'll see where it goes.
What are the other options available to? Is it nurture? Is it nature? Is it epigenetics, or whatever else it might be? There are so many things that influence it, but our mindset is one of the biggest determinants. I've just had a number of other surgeries with a hip replacement and 2 partial knee replacements, and my mindset prior to being told that I had to have it was they were talking about hip replacement. I've gone, no way. There is no way in the world I want to have and I've fought against it, and I looked for other options. And eventually the surgeon has gone, Derrick, no, this is the only option we've got. And as soon as I got my head around the fact that there is no other option, it was, okay, how do we make the most of it? How do we get the best? How do we get the best outcome? And I really immersed myself on it. I fought against it as much as I could. I didn't want to go there. But when we've got no other option, let's make the most of it.
But it's
And as a
coming back to
result,
that choosing how you respond, right? That's the bit that you've got the power over.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And because of the way I've responded and the good outcomes I've had, the doctors now tell me I'll be able to go back to running triathlons. So, people are going, a hip and 2 knees, and you're going to run triathlons. A lot of it is about approach. And don't get me wrong, I say a lot of it's about approach, but let me not downplay that other people have challenges with these surgeries. Maybe it's the way the implant has been put in. Maybe it's some other physiological reason within their body that it isn't accepted. Lots of other reasons. I'm fortunate, lucky, that mine has all gone really, really well. But a lot of that does come down to mindset and the way we approach it. And if it didn't work out well, I would still find a way to make it the best I can. And I explain that, and I'm going to go back to talking about the shooting. If it didn't work out the way I wanted, I would find a way to make it the best I can. As I was lying on the ground for those 3 hours, knowing that my body was closing down, knowing that I had massive injuries, I started looking at what the future might hold for me if I was to get out of this alive. If I was to get out of this alive. And it was that thinking, always positive that I wanted to, but knowing I might not. So if I get out of this alive, I knew that my life was going to change. I thought I may spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And my thinking at that stage was, if I have to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, how do I make life more interesting? And I thought to myself, well, I already play basketball. So if I put basketball together with wheelchair, I can play wheelchair basketball. And at least that's some outlet. And then I'm a person who wants to push myself for the best I can possibly get for myself. And as I was lying there, now the shooter is still shooting, there's bullets being pounding through bricks, and there's dust falling in my eyes, and my body is closing down. And I'm thinking, wheelchair basketball is a possibility, but I'm pretty good at basketball. If I'm pretty good at basketball and I put that together with wheelchair, I may be able to make the Paralympic team. And the Paralympic team are traveling around the world playing basketball. And in the position I've been in, I haven't been traveling around the world in the past. So this may actually be a bonus. And then I took it one step further, and I thought, and this is maybe my ego kicking in. And as you can imagine, special operations, we have a little bit of an ego that goes,
A
yeah.
smidge.
And my ego said, actually, if I can take what I do well and I add it to what they're already doing well, we may be able to make the Paralympic finals. I may end up with a gold medal as a result of getting shot. Now, this is my thinking as my body is closing down. It's not giving into it. It's always finding this is not going to be a perfect outcome, but what's the best I could get as a result of what I'm going through?
It sounds like
Accepting
you're
my circumstances as a result of my choices. I talk about taking responsibility on 4 levels. We take responsibility for our choice, our action, the consequences, and then the future afterwards. Now, when I say the future afterwards, when I had that conversation with my wife, I said, I may be shot and injured, maybe shot and killed. What's your life going to look like? I also made it very clear to her, and this is 5 years before the shooting, if I don't die, I need you to know anything better than death is a bonus. And even if I spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, I will find a way to make it good.
Mm.
And then while I was lying on the ground, body closing down, still the shooter shooting, I'm already looking at how can I make the most of the situation I'm now going to find myself in. It is a mindset we need to train ourselves into to make the most of it. We can't always change. We can't always influence everything, but we can influence how it affects us. We can influence our mindset. And I was going to make the best I possibly could as a result of choices that I had made, actions that I'd taken, consequences that I'd put myself into.
So many thoughts.
Yeah. It,
I think, I can hear your dad talking about the silver lining, right?
yeah,
Like through
yeah,
through all that.
yep, absolutely.
Um, yeah, and choice. There's so much running around in my brain. I'm trying to work out, what. Um, yeah, incredible and powerful. I um I really am fascinated. Um, we hear a lot of talk about resilience. It was certainly a buzzword during COVID. I heard it being spoken about in terms of our teachers who were having a real difficult time, our educators,
Yep,
because everything had to go remote. Um, and if you've ever been in a primary school classroom, I had a primary school age child through that period. Navigating 36 kids when you're in the same room with them is challenging enough, let alone 36 faces on Zoom while they're all in their
yeah,
rooms with their toys. I don't really know how any teachers manage to get anything taught. I also heard resilience a lot in the healthcare space in terms of doctors and nurses and all that. Um, I push against resilience as a cure-all, as a pill. So years and years ago, I did a YouTube video. It's probably still up there, where I spoke about resilience using the metaphor of a trampoline. So the idea that it has the beginning point. You sort
yep,
of status quo, and then it flexes and bends as you sort of jump on it, and it bends down, and it returns to its beginning point. And having obviously my ambulance career in the confines of a job, so maybe an hour, 2 hours, like you're responding to a job, responding, you're doing the things that we do in paramedics, and then you take the person to the hospital and you say goodbye to them. That's sort of an hour or two depending on your travel times and stuff like that. I think resilience in short bursts, in specific contexts, that sort of trampoline. Okay, so I'm just going to manage things and I'm going to return to baseline. I think it's relevant and it works great in short phases.
yep.
What happens to your trampoline after a couple of kids and a couple of years is it's saggy and you hit the ground when you jump on it and you got to put it out on the front lawn for hard rubbish, right?
Yep.
Because it's not sustainable. Um, it's similar to if you think about a road surface is reasonably resilient. But as people, cars go over and over the road over and over again, what do we get? We get potholes, right? And I think resilience as we all just need to be resilient. We need to train our staff in resilience. And I didn't like the way that, and I'm interested in your opinion on this. I didn't like the way it was used, particularly by um, organisations at management level, to the
Yep.
people on the ground, or the people in the emergency departments, or the people in aged care, or the people doing the footwork. Um, or we're going to run a training so you guys can be more resilient. I was like, are you shitting me? Like, you've recalled people from leave. They're not getting their breaks. They're working, 16 hours in full PPE, which I don't know if you've ever worn that. It's horrible and is
Oh
sweaty.
yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
disgusting. Um, these people are resilient. That's why they're still at work. Like, are you serious? More resilience is the prize. I thought it's such a, I think it became a thing that they love to say, oh, we're running, these things to make our people more resilient in all different
It
sort
was
of industries.
excuse me. It was a catch-all phrase.
It,
It was the
it
only thing that management had to go to because I feel for management because they were overwhelmed as well and they
absolutely.
didn't know what else to do. And so they've gone, well, we've got to find a way. And they were trying to give people skills. We've got to try and find a way to make you more resilient. But I think one of the things that wasn't accepted in resilience, and this again goes back to models that I work with, is that it's a continuum.
Yeah.
When we start something brand new, like the first time you pick up a tennis racket, you are fragile. You don't know what you're doing, you're making mistakes. Once you start learning how to handle that tennis racket and hit the ball, you become resilient, you're starting to solve problems, you're working out what you can do, and then you become the master and you become the best in D grade or whatever else it is.
Mm.
And then when you're the best in D grade, what happens? They put you up to C grade, you're no longer the best of the best, you're back to sort of the center, and you're resilient again because you're learning new skills. Now, the fragility, the learning, the new, this is scary territory, but you can get thrown back to fragile anytime at all, whether you're resilient or whether you're absolutely durable, because there's some other big challenge. And COVID was certainly one of those things that took people from where they were absolute brilliant performers way back past resilient right into fragile.
Mm.
They didn't know what they were doing. This was all new and they had to find their feet. They were experimenting. This wasn't about bouncing back. This was about finding out what you could possibly do in the first instance in these things. And once you have a trial, you can say that didn't work or that did work. And then you can start working out whether it's resilient or not. So it's that empathy to say there's experimentation in here as well. And that experimentation is allowable. You don't have to have perfect results every time. Because I think naturally people want to have good results. People don't turn up to work and go, oh, I'm aspiring to be an average worker today. No, we want to come to work and we want to be able to do our best. But within doing our best, there's experimentation, and that's got to be allowable if we're going to grow. And
Mm.
certainly when we get hit with big challenges, we get knocked right back to the very beginning. And this model where I call it the continuum of human durability. We start out as fragile, in the middle is resilient, and then durability is at the end. And this is where you are the master. And this is where there's no stress. Resilience is always bouncing back, always working out what the problem is, always problem solving. And it's a good place to be able to be if you want to solve problems. But every now and then, and I love your trampoline analogy, because when you're going through that bouncing stage, that's hard work. Your legs are working hard. And once you've worked out what you're doing, you then get launched into the air where you go, oh my gosh, this is great. This is beautiful. That is durability. That is where you're absolutely relaxed. I know I've got this. This is going very, very well. But now I want to take on the next challenge. I want to take a step up. And this is where floating in the air, you come back to the trampoline and you take the next bigger bounce so you can get higher again. And so we've got to accept that we will move along. We will get to a point where we can actually relax and go, I've got this.
I've got
I'm
this.
going to come to work. I absolutely love work. This is what I love doing. Know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly how I'm going to handle it. But once you get into that space of, oh, I'm really comfortable, we naturally say, I'm so comfortable, I'm bored. And
Yeah.
you want to
What's
take on the
next?
challenge.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so then you move back into the resilient space. And the more we realize that this is a natural process, the more we become comfortable with it and we go, okay, this is the point where I'm at. I know what I need to do to grow. And that becomes a flow as well.
Yeah, resilience in a way is almost a practice like mindfulness, right? Like it's a um, an action. It's something to um, continually practice and get better at and get more comfortable with, and
It's a process. There's no two
yeah.
ways about it. It is a process, and essentially a process of problem solving. I've hit a problem. What's the problem? Analyze it, work
Mm.
out the solution, and then implement it.
That's quite a
And
different perspective on resilience than I think it's been utilized, I guess, in sort of layman's terms as like an attribute that, you know, people
Yep.
are either resilient or not resilient. I think that how you speak about it as a process that is a, you know, there's learning and there's testing and measuring and there's, you know, getting in and out of the zone of familiar and comfortable and stepping out of it and being uncomfortable and stepping back in. And, you know, it's a very, you know, there's a fluidity to it, there's a flow to it, rather than, well, you just need more of this, you know.
Absolutely. And you talk about the conversation we're going to have after this podcast, that people can join your platform and learn more about it.
Yes,
I'll
if you want
actually
some
show you that
bonus
model.
content, Derek's
The
going to get
bonus,
into some details about his human durability model, which is real. Definitely tune in for that.
and I'll certainly show you that human durability continuum. And I'll show you the two different models for resilience as well, because there's a resilience we need day to day, week to week, that will get us through that hard stuff. And then once we're through the hard stuff and we've got, and I call it, we've refreshed, we've replenished, we've re-energized, and then we re-engage and we flick over to the aspirational, and we step through this to find our peak performance and push ourselves through challenges that we want to take on. And there's two different models of resilience. The durability comes from being able to flick from one back to the other, and then from the other back to the one. And if you stay in the aspirational too long, you will go into burnout. If you
Mm.
stay in the functional too long, you'll go into rust out. So
Rust out,
you've
I
got to
love
be able
it.
to flip. Somebody said that to me just recently, and I've got, I love that.
I
It's kind
love
of
it.
like what you said before. Please may I adopt that as my own. I'm
Yeah.
not that bright. I'm not that brilliant. I don't come up with these sayings. Somebody else has said it, and I thank you very much for whoever it was.
Oh, I pilfer from people all the time. Totally. Very reasonable. Before we finish up, you do now, you know, speak and run workshops, like you've said. I'm really curious as to what are you passionate about, I guess, awakening in people, or bringing awareness to the surface for them when you run your workshops and when you do your speaking engagements? What do you want them to walk out of that room with that they potentially weren't aware of or didn't know that they had inside them before they came in?
To give you, I'll give you a small analogy of a workshop I did with some students. I went in and did a presentation and told my story and gave some of my talks, or gave some of my models, my apologies. And the school came to me and said, do you run mentoring programs for kids who are struggling? And I've said, well, no, I don't, but I'm very happy to. So I designed something for them. But the distinction I made for them was that my idea behind the mentoring for these students who are struggling is that I am not looking to re-engage these students with education. I'm looking to re-engage these students with themselves. And as a result of engaging with themselves, they will make a decision whether they want education or whether they want to take a different direction. These are good people that have just fallen out of the system. And re-engaging them with themselves, they had more trust in themselves, more belief in themselves, more courage to step outside of what other people expected of them. You know, as a result of your education, you can expect, no, some of these people have no education and then go on and do some brilliant things because they take it from a different perspective. So I want people to re-engage with themselves. And even if they already have a lot of confidence and courage, they can step it up just that little bit more by believing in themselves, understanding their systems, the system that works for them, immersing themselves and working that system. And when it starts to leverage and they're getting the results they want, work out what it is you're doing well and leverage that and use that in other areas of your life. And if it starts to plateau, it's this time to start taking that guilt-free indulgence, going out and having some good times, getting the massage, having holidays. But if it is declining, trusting yourself that you know the next step to take. After the shooting, I knew the next step for me was to talk to a psych. It went against everything that tough men were supposed to do at the time, but I knew that was what I needed. And it was trusting myself and then going out and getting the support. So I want people to engage with their own beliefs. We may not know the end result or the absolute exact answer of how it's going to play out, but we know the next step. We know what we need to do to either get the advice or take the next step to get closer to it. I want people to start trusting their gut and believing in themselves. And as a result of that, and my workshops, I talk about less stress, more success. Let's not stress so much about making the perfect decision. Let's take some action, make an assessment of how that action is working. Is it working well? Leverage it. If it's not working, let's tweak it. Let's take some change. Less stress, create more success.
Amazing. What an incredible note to finish up on. I'm obviously, we're so aligned in that. Like, I'm all about people coming back to themselves and really investigating themselves and knowing themselves very deeply, and then entering, I guess, engaging with the world from that sense of self and knowing. So,
Yeah. And actually, just picking up on what you're saying there, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is normalizing that conversation inside our heads. Usually, when we're questioning ourselves and we're going, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I've got to go and speak to Lisa. Lisa will tell me what to do." No, let's normalize the conversation inside our head. We do have the ideas of what we can do, how we can do it. And some of the models, people just go, "I've never looked at it that way, but that's exactly how I live my life." And when we can articulate it, then we can consciously put it into practice rather than going, "Oh, what should I do now? It doesn't feel." No. I know the steps that I like to take. When I consciously put them into place, they will become more powerful for me.
incredible. Let's keep empowering people to live their
Love it.
lives to the
Love it. Love it.
fullest.
Love it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Derek. It's been fascinating. I could listen to you talk for a day and a half, I think.
It's a
Um,
privilege to be here with you, Lisa. I've followed you. Obviously, we've known each other for 5 years. I've been following you. And as soon as you said you had a podcast, it's like, I want to be on that podcast. I want to be on that podcast. Please.
please, well, if and when season two gets up, we'll definitely have you back because I absolutely think there's lots more we could have conversations about. For anyone that is considering making the enormous commitment of a few dollars a month to become a subscriber to Epiphanish Plus. After we finish up this chat, Derek is going to take me through his models and explain those two different types of resilience and his frameworks. So if you're very keen to know a little bit more about what Derek does and how he explains that, then make sure to join up as a subscriber and you will get access to that bonus content that he's so generously offered to offer to you guys. Thank you again, Derek. It's been such a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to where can people find you and book you, and where's the best place for people to learn more about Derrick McManus?
The socials are always a very easy place to go. LinkedIn, Facebook, and I've got an Instagram account. Not that I use it an awful lot, but I've got an account there, and I must get more active with it. But you can see what I'm doing on those media platforms. Certainly got a website, either humandurability.com.au or derrickmcmanus.com, and there is a distinction between the two. But very happy to find me on the net, give me a phone call, no obligations. If you want to just talk through something, what could we do for our business? What could we do for our group? I'm very happy to have those conversations and probably give you a dozen ideas just in the conversation that you can action. I have no expectations. I have plenty of work. So I'm very happy to have no expectation conversations with people if they just want to run it through and find out what's possible.
Fantastic. And all those links will be in the show notes. So if you haven't written them down, just click on those that you'll find there. Thanks again for tuning in to Epiphanish, and we trust it's been helpful. Make sure to share your Epiphanish moments on socials, and remember to leave your comments if you're watching us on YouTube. Otherwise, you can always find me on socials and send me a message and tell me what you like, what you don't like. I'm very open to feedback. Thanks again.